Nothing Personal starts in 30 seconds. It's just business. This is Nothing Personal.
Here you go.
Insider. That's the Nothing Personal word of the day. It is Thursday, September 19th, 2024. Insider, as in Woj, the Woj Bomb, retiring at 55 years old, going to be the general manager of his alma mater, St. Bonaventure. What is going on here? What an interesting story that we're about to tell. That's funny. That was so presumptuous of me on a random Thursday morning. It's a story. You'll decide if it's interesting. Reminder that if you think you know the word of the day and you want some merch at davidsamsonpodcast.com, get in the chat room live, 8 a.m. Eastern, and do yourself a favor. Try to guess the word of the day. You'll get free merch. New items up on the website right now, davidsamsonpodcast.com. I want to talk about insiders today. You're going to hear it's the lead story. Everybody's talking about how does someone seemingly in the prime of their career, making $7 million a year, someone with the best connections in the sport, gets information before anyone else, walks away. The minute I read that Woj was leaving ESPN, I wanted to go not to what his job was going to be. I was way more focused on the reason he was leaving, the value of what he does for ESPN, what it means for Shams and for maybe Chris Haynes, who's going to replace him. Why does ESPN need an insider? What's the value proposition? It's where my head goes first when anyone gets a contract. The economic term is simple. There is a market value. Sometimes it can be measured. Sometimes it can be perceived. Measured market value is a stock price. That's measured. You go online, the stock is trading at 50, one share is $50. There is no discussion. You may think it's undervalued, you may think it's overvalued, but that's the market for that asset. Someone in a job in sales where you have a commission structure, it's very simple to do the math and understand how the pay is the pay. The value of an insider, there is no way to measure that. Does ESPN go to its advertisers and say, excuse me, just out of curiosity, we get first on a consistent basis a trade, an injury, a signing? Are you willing to pay more? We're going to increase our rates because we're driving traffic, because people know to go to ESPN to cover a trade that was just leaked by our insider, and then we get to talk about it. Therefore, everyone's coming to us. Therefore, you'll pay more. That's one way to add value as an insider. Maybe it's with sub fees. We'll ask Skipper that in the next sporting class. Can you go to a cable company and say, we'd like $6 a sub because we've got the best insiders in the world working for us? I wonder how that would go over at Comcast or Charter or DirecTV. Maybe that's what solved the problem with Disney. I wonder whether Woj retiring means that the deal that DirecTV did with Disney is now off the table. the values disappeared. You can tell my sarcasm because having been a true insider, I don't break news as the host of Nothing Personal or an analyst at CBS. When I was president of the Marlins and in baseball for 18 years, we would sit around and say, we make the news and we'll decide. Going to call. Who do we owe a favor to? Who do we have the best relationship with? Who's the person we want to reward with the info? Pre-social media, that reward meant that you could make it in next day's paper. And if you've got competing papers, you can have one paper get it. And the other papers are left flat-footed until the next day. When online started, you had to be more tricky because when you give information to somebody and they post it, all of a sudden, it'll get confirmed by another source, but not first. And then they post it. So there was no longer a news cycle. It became 24 hours a day. And then insiders were born. Now, there were always insiders. Remember Peter Vesey in the NBA insider. He would speak to players, he would speak to coaches, he would speak to executives, and he would present his findings either in a column or in a pregame show. Then the insiders morphed into this, we got to get it now because we're going to get credit for every subsequent tweet because that is the principled business that they're in, that if you get info, you have to tweet it, then you get as per blank, the following happened. In order to be that person, you have to live a life that is way different than what newspaper men used to have to live, especially because now you're on TV. Now you have to post immediately. You have to be available immediately. It didn't used to be that way with papers. Woj looked at himself and said, I'm a little tired of the 24/7 lifestyle. I don't feel sorry for him. I am happy for him. It is amazing that he walked away from $20 million. He's in the middle of a 5-year contract. Not many people do that. It is an indictment of the business more than it is a love of St. Bonaventure, in my opinion. As he left and dropped his last Woj Bomb, he said he leaves with overwhelming gratitude for countless mentors, colleagues, subjects, stories, readers, viewers. He talks about his past 7 years at ESPN. What a privilege. Strange to say that because he did not even leak the story to his boss that he was leaving. He told Jimmy Pitaro the day of. The funny thing is, sometimes you give 2 weeks notice, Sandra Bullock, and say, hey, I'm going to go leave in 2 weeks. As an insider, it's almost outing yourself. Hey, I'm out of the game. For a team executive, there is no longer a benefit of giving Woj anything because there is no long-term payoff. There is nothing you will get back from him because he is now out of the business, out of the loop. He's been had. It's like when a spy gets found out. It's having the knock list out there. I valued as a team insiders. By the way, it's an insider's birthday today. Happy birthday, Ken Rosenthal. You know very well the life that Woj has. It's the life that you have. We talk about it often. Not going to be right all the time, but you're going to be busy all the time. Jumping off the rat wheel, the hamster wheel. I was going to say rat race, getting out of the rat race, getting off the hamster wheel, and I mixed my metaphors. Who doesn't think about that? It doesn't matter how public you are. It doesn't matter how much money you make. We all go through that during the course of our careers. Should I stay or should I go? We all say to ourselves, we can do this. We have to do it. Some people have to do it for family, for money, for support, for self-worth, for ego. whatever your reason is, jumping off the wheel, going into relative anonymity. He's going to be it doesn't matter that he's going to be the GM of St. Bonaventure. It doesn't matter. It's his alma mater. It doesn't matter that he has connections and information. The president or the athletic director of St. Bonaventure had some sort of statement about his value there. The way that you mark value is through salary. I promise you he's not making $7 million a year. Lucky if you're making $100,000 a year at that job. And that doesn't mean it's a worthless job. That is not my point. I'm talking about him being an insider. His experience as an insider did not dictate what his new salary would be. A true for love of the game moment. Why is it the lead story? Is it because there's going to be a bidding war for Shams? No. Is it a lead story because he walked away from $20 million? No. I think it's out. It's not, I think. 4869. It's my lead story today on Nothing Personal and our lead story because the world has put us in a position where insiders have become this currency that we are addicted to. We somehow need immediate gratification for things. We need to know things before the players. We need to know who's being traded, who's being hurt, because we play fantasy, because we gamble, because we want to believe that we're in the room where it happens. So we're getting our information from people who are not in the room where it happens, but get told about what happens in the room where it happens, and then can interpret it and sometimes be wrong, sometimes be right, because they're at the whim of the people in the room where it happens who can manipulate the information. It is a difficult, sordid business, a very difficult life. I give Woj credit. I am so happy. What's the insider review of the Milwaukee Brewers? What did the baseball insiders say? I did not have the Brewers winning the Central Division. I did not have the Brewers being the first team to clinch the playoffs. We told you yesterday they would be the first team to clinch the playoffs. And lo and behold, they were the first team to clinch the playoffs. I always like seeing in the clinching locker rooms. I love the champagne celebrations. I watch them all. I can't stand they're all in goggles. That's ridiculous. The sting is the thing. The sting is the thing. I love being right about one thing. If there's one thing that I've tried to communicate, well, there's so many over all of these 1,129 episodes we've done together. You know, the preseason odds, the over-unders, the prognosticators, the analysts. We did the season 10,000 times, 10 million times. The Brewers will finish third. I always laugh at the start of every season. Listen, it would save so much money. It would save so much physical toll. You want to know how to get rid of concussions in the NFL? Get the Guardian caps. I've got the best way to do it. Don't play the season. Do it all in the simulator. The Brewers proved under Pat Murphy that simulators don't know squat. It's pretty amazing, actually, what they've done. And it's so good for owners and so bad for the union and for baseball executives. The Brewers are in the postseason for the 6th time in the last 7 years, which is pretty amazing. Under Selig, from 1983, after they were in the World Series, to when Selig was done with the Brewers and Mark Antonaccio's first many years as owner, from basically 83 to 2017, they were in the playoffs. Count it, twice. And since then, 6 times. The reason why baseball wants the larger market teams to be in the World Series, but the smaller market teams to be in the playoffs, is that they want the ability at the next owners meeting, the one that happens in November after the World Series, they want the ability to stand up before the owners and say, look, idiots, spending money does not guarantee winning. Look at the Angels. and they'll go through the teams with the big payrolls who don't do well. And then they'll say the premium should be on smart front offices because look at the Guardians, look at the Twins, look at the Royals, look at their payroll, look at the Brewers. And then the owners leave the owners meeting. They call their GM and say, hey, what happened here? How is it possible that we're so bad and these other low revenue teams can be so good? What are we not doing? And the Brewers, in my favorite city in the country, have become this shining example. Don't forget Christian Yelich, their most expensive best player, out for the year. Their number one starter, Corbin Burns, traded to the Orioles before the season. Their closer, Devin Williams, who became the closer when they traded their other closer, Josh Hader, out for half the year. Their number two starter, Brandon Woodruff, see you later, out. And the Brewers just won their division. And not like winning a mediocre with a mediocre record. The Brewers are one of the best teams in the National League. What does it mean come playoff time? You'll hear the predictions in a couple weeks. But for right now, let's go, Brew Crew. How many of you had the Yankees clinching first? Yankee fans did. I'm going to have to take receipts on my wait to sees because you know I do. I have a bunch of wait to sees with the Yankees. In my preseason predictions, I'm pretty sure I had the Yankees not making the playoffs because I didn't like the rotation well enough. It is true that they have outperformed expectations. They clinched a playoff spot last night. I thought that trading for Jazz Chisholm would take them right into the tank. I thought not signing Soto after talking about the possibility of signing Soto would make him grumpy and furious, and that would take them right into the tank. And so far, they're not in the tank. It may be that I'm proved right at the end of the day, but in the middle of the day, at about 2:30 p.m., a little past the middle, you've had lunch, you're ready for a little snooze. Right now, I'm wrong on the Yankees. They clinched the playoffs. I love that they celebrated. I love that you pop the champagne as often as possible because it's hard to do. They have passed the Orioles so significantly. The Orioles are slumping. They cannot win a game. Yesterday, they made news. Coca, this was funny. Talk about breaking news. It's why when we're live, you're in my ear. And if something happens, but we do the show at 8 a.m. Eastern, it's 5:17 here Pacific a.m. No breaking news happening. Even Woj is sleeping. But on the Rich Eisen show, where I appeared yesterday, and it was live at 2 p.m. Eastern or 11 a.m. Pacific, they're right there when breaking news happens. So part of their staff, and this was Chris Brockman, he's looking around, seeing stuff that's breaking because you're on the West Coast and 2 o'clock East Coast, stuff's happening. And Craig Kimbrel got designated for assignment right as we were live on the air talking about either the Yankees or Ohtani or Bryce Young. Those are the three things we talked about on the Rich Eisen show yesterday. And Brockman just blurts out because somebody had it. Quick side note, Coke, I'm sorry to veer away from something, but you know that when a player gets designated for assignment, that's supposed to be private. Nobody is supposed to know about that because those players are actually in limbo. They're still getting paid the major league rate. They're still getting major league service time. You get 7 days once a player is designated to either release them, waive them, or trade them. And here's a little nugget for you. The reason why it's supposed to be private is that you're out there trying to deal with that player in the marketplace of the other teams. But it became a thing where you have to alert the player. You have to, because they're off the roster. They get designated for assignment. Their locker's gone, but they're in limbo, so they know. The union knows. The league knows. Insiders, one of the things they have is a direct connection. One of the great stories, a Horace Mann alum named Ron Blum, you may not know his name, but you should, with the Associated Press. In owners' meetings, here's another side story for you, Coca. We'd sit in owners' meetings and we'd get handed something, And Bud Selig would stand up, the commissioner, and say, all right, he would talk to his general counsel, a guy named Tom Ostertag. He'd say, Tom, start the timer. Let's see how quickly that MF or Ron Blum gets this. And we look around, hey, who's using the bathroom? Because this was, partially before cell phones. And then with cell phones, you're screwed. It's literally 5 seconds. There's a direct connection from someone in that owners meeting right to Ron Blum. And he would then post the memo. We hadn't even talked about it yet. Amazing. I guess people must feel good when they speak to an insider like, you're getting all this news. Hey, Craig Kimbrel is being designated. Who wants it? So it becomes this news that we talk about, and people were shocked by it, like something to talk about. Craig Kimbrel was washed up before the season started. The Orioles gave him a 1-year, $12 million deal because they gave him a 1-year, $12 million deal. Craig Kimbrel in today's market is barely an invite to spring training. It's a split major league, minor league deal, which he likely wouldn't accept. You shouldn't be giving him a guaranteed roster spot. He's not the Craig Kimbrel of old, who was a borderline Hall of Famer, a lockdown reliever, the nicest guy you'll meet. Not the nicest guy, but very, very nice. Good guy. Kimbrel is a good guy. Not very large either. But the Orioles designating him was just a regular roster move. When you go to your owner and you say, hey, we have a roster situation, we're going to have to designate a guy that we signed. The question the owner says is who? Then the owner says, what's his contract? And then you realize that there's 2 weeks left in the season. You're not exactly getting rid of a guy that's got $20 million left on his contract. It's not even something where the owner would say, no, we can't do that. We can't designate Kimbrel. He's protected. It's not how it works. So I was thinking about the decision because the media is going to talk about it like it's newsworthy. Is it newsworthy to you because you've heard of him? Is it newsworthy because you're surprised that a team would designate a guy with a 5+ ERA? Is it newsworthy because he wasn't even put in closing spots anymore, totally demoted? If Clay Holmes doesn't make the postseason roster, are you going to say, oh, wow, that's incredible? Is it a lead story because he was so bad all year, tied for 13 blown saves, the most in Yankee history, with 2 classic players, including a Hall of Famer, Goose Gossage and Dave Righetti? They both blew 13 saves for the Yankees. Is that going to be your reaction? It can't be true. Coca's upset with me when we talked about this topic. He'd like me not to think of Kimbrel as someone who's washed. Because his view is, hey, he had a great start to the season and just a terrible recent stretch. So maybe it's just a slump. Here's the problem, Coca. Well, I grant you that his first 39 games were above average. When you've got a player who you look at and you have an expectation of performance, and the expectation was not a sub-3 RA for Craig Kimbrel when they signed him. The expectation was you ride a guy until he's cold, and then you release him. That's what these signings are, the 1-year, $12 million. You ride him and trade him if you're not competing, and he's been good. You ride him and release him if you're not competing, and you give the spot to younger players to get them going, to get them experience. You ride him and ride him if you're a playoff team and he's still good, but the minute he's not, that's it. So if you're going to choose a season in which to be good or not good post All-Star break, pre All-Star break, you obviously want to be good post All-Star break. If you can survive being bad early, you want to be good late. Take a look at Clay Holmes, hanging on by a thread to a roster spot is my guess. But you look at the Yankees bullpen, and my guess is that thread will be strong enough to get him to a postseason roster. If you're Aaron Boone, do you ever pitch him in a situation that matters in the postseason? How can you when your job is on the line? Brandon Hyde of the Orioles was never going to pitch Craig Kimbrel in the postseason period. They weren't even going to put him on the roster. I just didn't think it was the biggest news of all time. He's totally washed up, Coca. Done. It's Thursday. All right, let's take a break early. When we come back, I get to review one of my all-time favorite movies, and then we're going to talk about something that happened in Canada that is not related to the Montreal Expos, but it is a fascinating example of how certain companies act as owners, certain companies act as TV companies. Cannot wait to go through what's happening up in Toronto. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Nothing Personal. It's David Samson coming at you. We are here every day, 8 a.m. Eastern, 5 a.m. Pacific. I normally don't say 5 a.m. Pacific unless I'm in the Pacific time zone, in which case I like to let you know, yes, it is 5:25 a.m. And yes, I am here. And yes, we are live. Get into the chat on the Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel. See if you can guess the word of the day, or just enjoy the show live, or on DraftKings Network, 10 a.m. We'll be here. It may be 10:26 Eastern right now, in which case, thanks for watching. Leading right up into 3 hours of Lebitard at 11 a.m. Eastern. You can go to our website, davidsamsonpodcast.com. Check out merch, check out past shows, check out our document. Haven't seen a document like this for any other podcast. Spread the word about accountability. We have our picks of the day. We have our wait to sees. We have our words of the day. We have the movies we've reviewed. Everything is there for you to see as we are 1 month away. 1 month from today will be the 5-year anniversary of Nothing Personal. 5 years. You have been loyal to us for 5 years. To all the new people listening and watching, we need you. To all the people who've been there from the beginning, we needed you and love you always. We'll do some fun celebrations as we're in the middle of October celebrating 5 years, that's for sure. So every Thursday, I'm going to review a different movie in my top 100 list, which is located on davidsamsonpodcast.com. This is for you, the 6% in September. So American Hustle. It's number 20 on my list. It used to be much higher last year. Next year, it may move back higher again. I've watched American Hustle many times. Don't forget Bradley Cooper. Don't forget Jeremy Renner. Don't forget Jennifer Lawrence. Don't forget Amy Adams. Don't forget Christian Bale. Don't forget Steely Dan. Work. Don't forget Abscam. And don't forget a plot and acting performances that leave you glued to the top of your head. American Hustle is a movie that if you've seen, watch again. If you haven't seen, watch it right now. I loved it as much this past week as I did the first time I saw it. And that, to me, is a mark of a good movie. All right. By the way, the whole review was contained in there subtly with cool references. I'm hoping people got the glue reference. I know Sarah didn't. Sarah said to us yesterday, Coca, this is a good one. I can't even believe it. How many movies of my top 100 have you all seen? Regardless of your age or generation, are you an X, a Y, a Z, a millennial, a boomer, whatever you're called? Sarah has seen 3 movies out of my top 100. And my first reaction when she told me that was not to laugh at her. It was the opposite. I was jealous. Can you imagine getting to see 97 of the top 100 movies that are this good for the first time? Oy, oy, oy. It's heaven. All right, put up that random number generator. This is a document put together by one of you, which I appreciate. Coca just clicks a button and we get another movie to review out of our top 100. What's the color? Yellow we've done, green we haven't, or green we've done and yellow we haven't? I can't remember which it is. But if you're watching on Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel, you're seeing this document. Press it, Coca. Almost Famous. That's a top 5er. How many times do I talk about Almost Famous? I can't believe it's been in my top fives. We've talked about it on this show. I just can't figure out the color still. You'll let me know for next time. Nothing personal pick of the day, presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. We've got a big game going on in the National League East. We've got the New York Mets, who have seemingly come out of the depths of despair to not only pass the Braves, but to catch the Diamondbacks and potentially catch the Padres to become the number one wild card. Can they catch the Phillies? The Phillies have not clinched yet, but I assure you, the Mets can't. However, this series between the Mets and the Phillies, critical. Tonight's game, magical. Yankee fans may remember Severino. Do you? Mets fans are falling in love, ready to give him the ball in a postseason series. We are taking Severino tonight at minus 135 over the Phillies. The Phillies have not played like the Phillies for well over a month. The Mets are a better team today than the Phillies. And I'm talking about with Lindor, without Lindor. And by the way, without Lindor, they've got Acuna's brother playing shortstop. He's hitting about 900 over his first 6 games. We're taking Severino and the Mets over the Phillies as our DraftKings nothing personal pick of the day. Nothing personal pick of the day, presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. It's Thursday night football, baby. And guess what? We got a little parlay action for you. We're doing pretty well in the NFL this year. I like our picks so far. Jets, Jets. Pats, Pats. We're taking the Jets in the money line over the Patriots tonight. And the parlay is that the game has to go under 38.5. And the reason I think that the Jets will win and it will go under 38.5 is I believe the Jets defense will look at Bill Belichick. They'll look at the Patriots. They'll look and say, you know what? I've got an idea, Mr. Mayo. How about if you enjoy our cheese? 0 points. They'll give up a few to the Patriots. 10 at most. I think this game goes under. I think the Jets win comfortably. The nothing personal pick of the day presented by DraftKings is a parlay with the Jets money line and under 38.5. And you will get that for plus 161. Obviously, lines are subject to change. How did we do yesterday with our pick of the day? We won it. Cease and the Padres were only minus 112, just slightly over the 10% vig over Framber Valdez and the Astros. And Cease pitched a gem. The Padres went back to back to back. People are talking about the Padres as though they are World Series bound. They are playing well. They've got young players. Jackson Merrill, our plus 950 rookie of the year before the season started, our pick for rookie of the year. That may be a big winner for y'all. Although there were a lot of predictions that were bad. Coke and I were talking about that before the show. Anywho, the Padres are playing well. Winning the World Series, it's a difficult proposition. Winning a game over the Astros, not as difficult. 124 and 130 going into tonight's action. Let's talk Canada. Oh, Canada. I am very appreciative of the audience in Canada. Very appreciative. I love going to Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, Alberta. Reminds me of the Avenue Q Broadway show. If you know, you know. I think Coke and Sarah's eyes are rolling to the back of their head, which is too bad. What do you think about consolidation as a concept? Do you like it? Ever play the game Monopoly? What's your strategy in Monopoly? Do you like to get the corners? You want to make sure you get Marvin Gardens? You all right with taking the purple too? Because you want them right out of the chute? Cheap hotels, but hey, I want to own as much as possible? Or are you a premium kind of person? Just give me Park Place and Boardwalk, and we're going to stop there. Maybe Indiana, Illinois, we may go Reds, but I like sort of the yellows. Don't bother me with railroads. Two different philosophies. Consolidation is when someone looks and says, hey, I own X. He owns Y. Wouldn't it be great if I owned Y? Because then the guy who owns X doesn't own any part. Rogers Communications. Have you heard of them? They own the Blue Jays. They're a big time company in Canada. For all my Canadian following, which is a pretty heavy percentage, which I thank you so much for, pretty amazing. You look at Rogers as the big corporate behemoth. Don't you look at Bell that way also? How do you feel about the fact that Rogers is buying out Bell? Bell owned about 38% of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Do you know what that is? MLSE, Larry Tannenbaum, they own a ton of stuff. How about the Raptors? How about the Maple Leafs? They own the MLS Toronto team. They own the CFL Toronto Argonauts. Basically, they are, for all intents and purposes, one half of the Toronto sports landscape. The other half was Rogers, who owns the Blue Jays. Rogers has been trying to buy out Bell. And Bell is in a position that so many companies are in. Too much debt. They've got to figure out how to raise capital in order to pay off that debt. Several ways you can raise capital. One of them is by selling assets. The thing is, once you sell an asset, you don't want to use the proceeds to cover operational losses because you can only sell an asset one time. If you're selling an asset in order to pay down debt, if you're selling an asset in order to build and acquire something else, a reallocation of assets, it's way better than selling stuff in order to cover any losses you have from living. Bell was very much on the former side, where they simply wanted to pay down debt. And they saw an opportunity where Rogers had an interest in being the king of the consolidators. But Bell said, you can own everything, own every team, have at it. We're going to get to pay down debt, but also you're still going to have to use us as your broadcast partner. I love that. I love the whole deal for everybody. What it means is that in Toronto, really in Canada, but call it Toronto, you've got, and this is not a yuck on the hockey teams throughout the country, excuse me, in all the different provinces. This is more a reflection of when you look at basketball, when you look at baseball, look at hockey, when you've got one person who owns all of those teams in a community, that is the ultimate consolidation. In America, it's been tried. Remember Wayne Huizenga in Florida owned the Marlins, the Panthers, and the Dolphins all at the same time? He thought that there was an amazing economy of scale. One sales force for each. Total. We'll cover all three teams. We'll build a Wally World up in Miami Gardens where the Dolphins play. We'll have the baseball team there. We'll have the football team there. Let's get the hockey arena. We'll do everything. Turns out when you meet with Wayne Huizenga, who's dead now, so no one's meeting with him, in theory, his view of what consolidation meant and the power of being the consolidator, it really did not pan out the way he expected from a business standpoint. Now, of course, asset values have increased since those days. Rogers is spending about $3.5 billion US to buy out this share of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. They will eventually buy out the rest. They will be the sole controlling owner. Rogers Communications believes from a company standpoint, because this is a company play, that cornering the market on sports teams, being able to control every part of the consumer from when they wake up in the morning to when they go to bed at night as a sports fan, there is value in that. I like it. I like the play. The question is, you leave out there TSN, which is the network owned by Bell. They're going to continue to air games. They will not have any power the way they used to as an owner of the team. They are simply a broadcast partner. My prediction is that doesn't last long, because when you have been in charge and then you go back to being a rights holder, that is a very tough transition to make. The reason why it's tough is that when you own all sides of a deal, you can control and manipulate the deal. When you own only half the deal, you can attempt to manipulate, attempt to be Machiavellian, but clearly it is way harder. How does this end? This ends with Rogers continuing to buy out the rest of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. They will combine forces. They will try to maximize the economies of scale. They will discover that it did not work. They will discover at some point that it is having a quashing impact on their overall business. And then they will sell. And all of that will take place. Is it a half a decade, 2 decades? This is not a permanent situation for Rogers. One of the things that people down in the US talk about is, why don't we see more of that? We've got a company owning the Braves, Liberty Media. They want to sell. They don't want to be in the business of owning a sports team. That's not their core business. Private equity firms want to become owners, but not controlling owners. That is not their core business. They're in the investment business. Generally, companies have businesses that are not sports teams. Why? No one wants to believe it. Sports teams are not great business. They're great assets. They do not produce the type of cash flow that people seem to think, like insiders. It's why when owners own a team and they don't have other sources of income and they need the team for income, the payrolls are down because the teams have to be profitable. All of this is to say that it's not a matter of whether it is good or bad for a city to have all of its sports teams owned by one person, or a company own all of the sports teams, or an individual own all the sports teams. It's to tell you that the reason why you see it so little is that it doesn't make financial sense. I want to end the show in the last few minutes we have. I want to talk about something that happened yesterday, and it fascinated me to no end. I was watching the football game this past weekend, and we talked about it. And of course, I'm having a moment, but it was the Falcons, and they must have been playing the Eagles. And when the Falcons scored at the end, it was, remember that touchdown? It was Monday night only. Holy cow, Coca. Remember Drake London? Drake London caught a touchdown pass and then got a 15-yard penalty that caused the extra point to be 48 yards in order for the Falcons to win the game. When Drake London scored his touchdown, he did a celebration that was basically firing off a machine gun. It was not like the Tyreek Hill handcuff celebration. It was literally, that's totally wrong, 12-18-69. The celebration was figuratively a gun being shot, like, how's that for an imitation? Well, just a few days later, Drake London had to speak to the media, as did Raheem Morris, the coach, because it became clear that that sort of celebration did not land very well. There's several reasons why you could say it did not land very well. One of which is there was a fatal shooting at a high school, another school shooting only a few days earlier. Oh, by the way, the school where the shooting happened was about 25 miles away from where the Falcons are operated out of. Oh, by the way, the survivors' families, there were guests of the Falcons at a game. So Drake London says, I'm going to celebrate by shooting off a gun. The team then goes up to him and says, hey, Drake, here's the problem. That didn't land exactly right, so we're going to need you to say a couple things. The best they could get out of Drake London is that it's a trend around football. He told this to ESPN, to the insiders maybe. It's a trend around football right now to do that type of celebration. It was my first Monday night football game. I kind of lost myself in there. I wasn't happy with the position I put my team in. I don't love that as the lead. The lead should be there is no room for gun violence. There is no room for in any way objectifying or making it cool to shoot off a gun in a public area. It is unbelievable that it's a trend. My role going forward is to make sure it's not a trend. By the way, I lost myself out there because it was my first Monday night game. I would have been relatively okay with that. Him saying I wasn't happy with the position I put my team in, I'll bet you dollars to donuts he's talking about the 15-yard penalty. He's talking about the fact that the extra point was back 15 yards. That's what he's unhappy about? That's funny. Do you know what I'm unhappy about? I'm unhappy about the fact that there's gun shootings and school shootings. Raheem Morris, remember what he said in the beginning. He said, Drake's a great kid. His intent was not as a use of a weapon. He probably was shooting T-shirts into the stands, to be honest with you, because he's just that kind of guy. That's what the Falcons had Morris go with after the game. Shooting T-shirts. You wonder why I didn't let my kids play with guns. I wasn't allowed to play with guns. You know where I stand on guns. You want to, I'm not coming for your guns. Have guns. I just don't want to be around them. Raheem Morris tells you it's a T-shirt. It's good. It's normal. Meanwhile, we've had T-shirt guns in our ballpark. They're more like thump, things you shove in and then they go out into the crowd, try to get them to the upper deck to the one person sitting up there until we close the upper deck. Then you don't need the thump. That's when you just get the people on the field throwing it off the dugout. Hey, we can reach just about anybody anyway. You know what noise it makes? Thump. It doesn't make totally different. What's strange, though, is that Raheem Morris then changed his entire point of view. Said it's a celebration that you don't want to have happen because of the violence that goes on in our country that we're very sensitive of. But don't worry, he had no ill will and no intent. That's a mistake by all of us, on all our parts, to have those things come out in light of what's going on in our country, not being sensitive to those situations. I like that, but I would have liked that first. Coaches are in a tough position, man. They got to protect their players. They got to put players in the best possible light. I like managers and coaches who are willing to call out their players, because when you call out your players publicly, it has to mean that you've spoken to the player privately and you've explained to the player what you're doing, why you're doing it, and the player may not like it, may not even understand it, but certainly has notification of it. It was a missed opportunity by the NFL, by Raheem Morris, by the Falcons organization, by everybody to put an end to that immediately and not make it about the game, not make it about the point after, not make it about T-shirts. It could have been a perfect opportunity as a teaching moment to say, listen, I can't even believe that that would be the first thing that would come to my head. Where are we as a society that you need an AR-15 celebration to show that you're cool? Does that make me liberal? No. It just makes me reasonable. Every community has death by gun shootings that have happened. There's no room for that trend anywhere in football, sports of any kind. It's just silly. It's an unforced error. And the NFL is so good at unforced errors. Why? Because they don't care enough, because no one holds them accountable for any of the errors, for any of the problems. They just have the opportunity to keep going because we allow it. When you have that power, that's just business. To everyone who dies from a shooting, it's nothing personal.